The entire contents of this podcast and website are based upon the opinions of Tammy Garcia and her guests, unless otherwise noted. The information on this podcast is not intended to replace a one-on-one relationship with a qualified healthcare professional and is not intended as medical advice. It is intended as a sharing of knowledge and information from the research and experience of Tammy Garcia and her guests. This is the Naturally Inspired Podcast, coming to you from our 1890 homestead in Johnstown, Colorado. I'm Tammy, and I want to thank you for joining us. Let's get started and help people feel good so they can do what they love for longer. Today on the Naturally Inspired Podcast, we have KrisAnne Hall joining us. KrisAnne is an attorney, an author, a constitutional analyst, and the founder of Liberty First University. She also has a new movie coming out called NonCompliant, and that will be available very soon. You can view the trailer by going to noncompliantmovie.com. My greatest takeaway from my conversation with KrisAnne today was that if we want a free republic, then we must be willing to take the actions needed to keep it. The government was not designed to rein itself in or keep itself contained. It was designed for the people to keep it reined in and contained. We control the government. The government does not control us. So with that, I hope you enjoy this episode with KrisAnne Hall of the Naturally Inspired Podcast. Thank you so much for being on the Naturally Inspired podcast, KrisAnne. I've been so excited to have you on. Finally, a voice of reason, someone who could tell me what the heck is going on.
Yeah.
Your background is in constitutional law, correct?
Yeah, it's I was a prosecutor for a decade, and while I was prosecuting, I ended up working for I took a sabbatical for 2 years and worked with a nonprofit constitutional law firm, and fell in love. You know, it's interesting how God works that all out. But I actually was interested in constitutional law in law school because I had a really great professor, and he encouraged me to get a scholarship. So I actually went to the University of Florida College of Law and received their constitutional law scholarship my second year, which
cool.
was a pretty big deal to me. I don't know about anybody else, but it was a big deal to me. And I can't really explain how I got here today. I mean, I was a prosecutor. I was fired for teaching the Constitution. So all of these things were just catalysts to my passion. You know.
And now, I mean, I don't know about you, but I definitely see the trend towards the Constitution being completely and totally under attack. And even people have suggested that we get rid of the Constitution, that it's no longer valid or relevant, I think is the word that they're using.
Yeah.
And that just blows my mind. That blows my mind. So you got onto this point in your life where you just really felt passionate about the Constitution. And it's interesting how things align, like you said, because now we are really in a battle to protect this, aren't we?
Yes, we are. Absolutely. I mean, in this, there have been a couple times in America's history, you know, its foundation, the period of the Lincoln period, the war in the States, where we're really battling, not just simply for the future of America, but for our very lives today. And that's where we are today. It's a little bit different, and it's hard for some people to really grasp and comprehend, because this is not your typical standing army marching down the streets kind of thing that we saw in the first two battles. This is really a more quiet and covert battle. And it's a very ingenious way to enslave a people into self-imposed submission. And
Yes.
because the self-imposed submission is the worst form of slavery, the self-induced ones, because you don't actually see the shackles that you put on yourself. And those shackles are built in your mind through fear.
Yeah.
And I think there's a famous quote, I don't know if it's actually a quote or whatever, but it said that fear makes the bravest man bow. And that's really an ingenious tool of people in power, the greedy people in power over history. We see that apply all over history over and over again.
Yeah.
And this time, it has been refined to the point where we have all of this perfect storm of technology and interaction with people, and
it's a
media.
desensitization too.
Yeah.
I feel like, I mean,
Oh yeah,
you could say people are
absolutely.
in denial, but I
Right.
mean, if you took the headlines of today and presented them to someone 20 years ago, their reaction would be like, oh my, there would be hysteria.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and that's not just simply the desensitization. The desensitization is achieved through fear. And so we fear a larger boogeyman than we fear the infringement of our rights. And that's because the propaganda increases the fear beyond its relevant proportions.
Right.
Combined with the trained ignorance of the people for over 177 years on what is actually the value and relevance importance of our rights.
Why do you say 177 years? What's important about
well,
that?
In 1833, we set aside our founders' instructions on how to run federal government. We set aside the founders' instructions on how the Constitution is supposed to be applied. Okay. And from that day forward in 1833, we were headed down the wrong path of diminished self-governance and exponential increase, unconstitutional exponential increase of federal role, federal power, federal influence over our lives.
What were some key things that were implemented at that time that achieved
Well, it was
that?
actually just one thing. We had just come through a crisis, a political crisis. I'll give you a little finger quote things there. The political crisis where the states had stood up to the federal government based on their perception of an unlawful tariff. And the unlawful tariff, the protest of these states against this unlawful tariff really snapped Congress back into its proper submission to the states as the controlling authority over the federal government. Well, that really sent shockwaves through our system, through the global system of how powerful the states were designed to be, and realizing that you could not overcome that. And that's the way the Constitution's designed. The Constitution is designed so that the states are a very, very powerful check and balance on federal power, because the people have more control, state and local. So when they have more control, state and local, then they have ultimate control over the federal. Without the states having that kind of control over the federal government, then the people are left to a powerless state over the federal government, and really reduced to the state of servitude and subjects to a federal government, which is where we see today. But in 1833, we set aside the instructions. So our founders actually wrote an instruction manual written by a man named St. George Tucker, he's not like saint, like, but it was just a name that they used in that day. So St. George Tucker, and he was actually a member of the Continental Congress. He was a lawyer. He was trained in English law and knew the shortcomings of English law and English law training, and didn't want the American lawyers to have those same shortcomings. So he wrote an entire treatise on how the Constitution was supposed to work. Okay. Well, as a result of this crisis, they said we can't have people learning how the Constitution is supposed to really work. So almost in a just sweep, the lawyers and those training to be lawyers set aside the treatise written by St. George Tucker and picked up a treatise written by a Supreme Court justice named Joseph Story. And Joseph Story's treatise was really a rewrite of the Constitution by a very, very subtle shift in language, a very subtle shift in application, and a very subtle shift in authority, just simply teaching what I call federal supremacy and judicial supremacy. And so in that sweeping motion over a period of 177 years, that's where we are today. Wow. It's interesting because Samuel Adams actually warned us. He was warning his people, but you know, there are, as Jefferson says, self-evident truths, things that just simply remain true over time because human nature never changes. Right. Samuel Adams said, "No people will tamely surrender their liberties nor be easily subdued when knowledge is diffused and virtue is preserved." He said, on the contrary, when the people become universally ignorant and debauched in their manners, they will sink underneath their own weight without the aid of foreign invaders. And I think that warning becomes very apparent to us today when we stop and realize we've lost more personal liberty in the last 6 months at our own surrender and submission than we have from foreign governments in the last 60 years.
Wow. And I totally agree with you. It's interesting that you made the comment, you know, it was a subtle shift. And the way he did that was simply through kind of the changing of language.
Yes. And the education, right? So it always, you have to interfere and co-opt the education program. And then once you have co-opted the education program, while you're doing that, the co-opting means a change in the language, meanings of words, replacing words.
Which that is on the fast track right now.
Yeah. Well, you don't even have to change the entire meaning of a word. You can actually just simply devalue or dilute the meaning of a word. For example, if you asked most people to define today what the word state means as a political entity, not like I live in a state of happiness, you know, but as a political entity, most people would not understand that our states, as we know them today, are not just simply subsets of a federal government, but our states are still today legally and were designed to be independent, sovereign political countries. So we are in a union of independent political sovereign countries that we call these United States.
Right. I would agree with you. I think that has been purposefully, blanketed. We've been blanketed as one country. And we're losing. It's funny because, you know, some people argue for more diversity, but in the process of trying to blanket this country and under one federal law, we're losing diversity.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, diversity has always been the treasure of America. I mean, even at the foundation, Thomas Paine wrote about the treasure of diversity and how it was an advantage to us to actually gain our independence. He said, if we'd all been, you know, monocultural, if we'd all been British, to actually declare independence from Great Britain would have been nearly impossible. So because we were, even at that time, you know, I hate using that word melting pot because that gives the wrong impression. But even at that time, we were a very diverse society. It was that
Right.
diversity that actually gained our independence.
Right.
But what people don't understand is that diversity is not the surrender of individual liberty,
Right.
and it's the individual liberty that stems from, as the Declaration of Independence says, understanding that we are endowed by these liberties: life, liberty, pursuit, happiness, by our Creator. They are not gifts from government. They are not creations of law. It is that understanding, the unity in individual liberty, that gives us our strength. So we
Right.
don't have to surrender our liberty. We don't even have to surrender our cultural distinctions
Right.
to be united. We can have diversity.
Right, right. So I want to talk about censorship, and we talked about the changing of words, and I think that word diversity has been changed on
Yes.
us. Right, it's diversity as defined as to a political party wants it to be defined as, and it is actually what you just described is what diversity is. Right.
I would say that it's if we're going to be correctly speaking, I would say that we are not actually ruled by a political party. We are ruled by a social subset.
Mm.
And the social subset, there are members of that party in the social subset, but we also have, the same social subset that spreads throughout different parties. It's nonpartisan. And it's the social subset, this minority social subset, reeling, attempting to dictate to the rest of the people mandates, like you said, on speech, on life, and ideologies, even.
Ideologies.
Talking about speech control, we're talking about thought control, all based not on, the sort of sci-fi kind of thing of mind control, but through social pressures, through peer pressure, through
extortion.
Through
It really is
political
extortion. It really is, because if you don't say what we like and carry the narrative, then we cancel you.
It's extortion of the conscience.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is James Madison wrote an essay in 1792 about property. And he said that the conscience is the most precious individual property that we own. And it should be the one that we guard the highest.
Right.
And again, sort of circling back as to what I said in the beginning, it's because when your conscience can be subdued, it is not by other people, it is by yourself.
Right.
And then you lose self-governance at your own hand, which is the hardest form of slavery to escape.
Right. Right. And I see that almost on a daily basis now, because we have this different public forum, right? Like you said, it's not people marching in the streets, and you're not having these discussions face to face anymore. You're having them in this virtual reality. Right. It's in a public forum that's virtual. And I see people towing lines and portraying themselves differently than they would in person.
Oh yeah. My husband and I have this conversation all the time. And my husband will tell people on social media, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't say this to my face, but here's my address. Why don't we meet and let's see if you have the same opinion? So he's a little bit bolder in there. He's like, come on, let's go. I'll drive, I'll fly wherever you want to go. I'll meet you on your ground. Just let me know. Let me see if I want to know if you have the courage of your convictions, because you need to know I do.
Right. So when it comes to our constitutional rights and censorship and the First Amendment, where are we at? Because we are being censored like nothing I have ever seen. I mean, my work is based in natural health. I've followed people for years, professional doctors, all these people who have grown this massive following with the information that they relay on a daily basis. And they've been shut off overnight.
Right.
Shut off overnight. What recourse do we have here? And, something that people say all the time, which, I really don't agree with, is that, well, they were a private company. They're a private company. They have the right to do whatever. They have received government funding for years.
Right.
So where does this lie?
Well, I love getting back to the basics, and I'm sure you won't mind or be offended because you started the conversation, but it really, really begins with education. And you used a term that I'm working very hard to wipe from the American psyche,
Okay.
and it's the term constitutional rights. No one in America has constitutional rights, because when you look at that term constitutional, that suffix al means to be derived from. And when we speak constitutional rights, then we start believing that our rights are derived from the Constitution. Our rights are not derived from the Constitution. Our Constitution exists because our rights pre-exist the Constitution. We wrote the Constitution to create a limited defined government so that our pre-existing rights would be secure. So I always want to tell people we don't need to talk about constitutional rights, because then you think if somebody amends the Constitution, that changes your rights.
Right.
Or you have these arguments, right? That, well, the Constitution says, and then the lawyer says, and the judge says, therefore it doesn't mean, right? So the Constitution doesn't mean what you think it means.
Right.
And so we do have a bit of a problem today understanding the defense of our rights. You call them our inherent rights, our natural rights, however that you want to refer to that.
Right.
But and the complication is that because we have failed to secure our rights in the property realm for so long, we have sort of backed ourselves into a very difficult corner. Okay. And so it is true that private businesses are free to conduct their businesses in the way that they should or want to. As a matter of fact, a private property right in business is a private property right to discriminate. That is the right. So that has sort of been muddied by our idea of civil rights.
Right.
And that government can force onto people who have businesses to take customers they don't want to take for whatever reason.
Right. Okay.
But if we're working in a realm of free market society and we're actually preserving property rights, then, the foundation that our founders set is that I absolutely have a right to discriminate against anyone who comes into my business. I could literally have a business that says this business will only welcome brown-haired, brown-eyed women under this, under the height of 5'2".
Right.
Right. Christian, right? I could even throw religion in there. If if we really had a society built on property rights, I, as a property owner, as a business owner, would be able to say, nobody comes in.
Right.
We do actually have an application of that in private clubs. So if you have a membership of the private club, then you can restrict access that way. But when we have this misapplication of what we call public accommodation, now all of a sudden we've given government authority over private property, that has no place in a society built on private property rights. Point number one, private businesses ought to be private businesses with the full ability to discriminate in any way, shape, or form they want.
This is where we've gone wrong.
Yes. And the free market system then dictates. Because, if I don't, if I'm not that brown-eyed, brown-haired woman under 5'2" who's a Christian, and you refuse my service, then that's fine. I'll just reach out to all my friends. Some of them will fit your description who will not come to you.
That's right.
That's how a free market society is supposed to work.
Right.
So we have that intrusion, but we also have the other intrusion that you mentioned, the government grants, government money, which is really government picking winners and losers. That is completely contrary to private property principles, but it's also contrary to the Constitution. Right. Because the Constitution, number one, does not delegate any authority to the federal government to have any influence, whether it be regulatory or monetary, on our private
business.
Bottom line, dumb.
Yeah.
Just, it's not there. It doesn't exist. It's an invented power by those in government, supported by those in government, to take the individual property rights of the people. Right. So as social media is concerned, setting aside the government money aspect, they are absolutely private property.
Right.
And private property, they should be able to choose whatever they want. If Facebook came out and made a public notice, we are only going to support the ideologies that we believe in, then they would have a private property right to do that.
Right.
The violation at this point with social media, and some people are starting to pick up on this, the violation at this point is civil. It is a tort problem, which is an aspect of civil law, a contract problem.
Okay.
And so what's happening is these social media companies are violating their lease agreements with the people who are using their website. And the awakening of the people to this lease agreement violation is why now all of a sudden you have this revamping of every social
terms and conditions.
Terms and conditions, right?
Yeah.
So the rewrite of the terms of conditions is a reaction to the realization that they are violating their own lease agreements with these people. They are legally vulnerable. So now everything is being corrected so that you don't have that legal vulnerability anymore. And so that's
after the damage is done.
Yeah. Well, but the damage actually came not with their censorship. The damage came with the government grant money.
Yeah.
Because if the government had not been in the grant business, then it is arguable that there would have been a burst of platforms all at the same time.
Right.
But in reality, the government charity, which is unconstitutional, that helped create these entities, created an unequal platform in which you have an unnatural growth. Right. Because there was no competition. So the government put this money out, which eliminated the competition, which creates the situation where the free market doesn't work. You don't have choices, right? Which is ironic now because, you have the Trade Commission trying to come in and bust up social media monopolies, when in reality, they're the ones that actually created these monopolies because of their because of the grant programs and the disproportionate starting points.
Right. Now, do you think that was nefarious? Because there are people out there that think that, these platforms are used by the government and government agencies like CIA, FBI to, push a certain narrative, or because they understood the power of it, even when it wasn't even making any money.
Well, I will let people come to their own opinion as to those kinds of motivations, but I will tell you without a doubt, and I was in the military, I was in military intelligence, without a doubt, the government money went to these organizations with an obligation to share their technology, right? So the technology that was created, which includes access to your personal data, the data mining, the cameras in your house, the cameras on your phones, that's part of the agreement, the share agreement. And there is I don't even think the government even denies that. So, you can come to your own opinions on whether they're actually manipulating the message from the government, but there is absolutely and ought to be no doubt that the investment of the federal government into these platforms in the beginning came with an agreement that you will share what you obtain with this money.
Right. Do you see us walking this back? What's our way out of this?
Absolutely. There are lots of solutions available to us. So many, it would be impossible to actually even envision them all, much less talk about them right here. And they are peaceful, by the way. Most people feel discouraged, feel defeated, and they are unaware of all of these peaceful. That's part of the disinformation program. That's part of the miseducation that we've been under for the last 100 years, is to back people into a corner to create chaos because we don't understand anymore how the Constitution's supposed to work. We don't understand anymore the real power the people have to control government. I mean, for decades upon decades, the people have been taught that they're only, and not only their only, but their most powerful term of controlling government is voting, which is a Complete lie. Voting is not how you control government. Never has been, never was envisioned to be, never will be how you control government. You can't control government, 3 seconds every 4 years. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
So the idea that has been pushed upon the American people that voting is the only control of government is by design, because voting is not the only control of government, will never control government. And so when the American people start believing that voting is the only thing that controls, when that doesn't work, because it will not work, when that does not work, then the people become exasperated. They become discouraged.
What else can I do?
Well, I voted and nothing changes
the whole time.
And they become disengaged. That's a perfect word. They apathetical. I've tried. I did what I could, and now I'm done. Well, the problem is we have not tried from a real practical political perspective. We have not engaged. We have not even begun to exhaust all the peaceful measures that we have. We actually have a documentary that is coming out called NonCompliant, and your followers can find it at noncompliantmovie.com, where we start
trailer.
talking.
It looks awesome.
Oh, thank you very much. We're very excited about it. Very excited about it. And so it is envisioned to be a series of documentaries, because we don't want to try to
cram everything in,
dump everything in, right? Because then people become overwhelmed. You can't, there's only a certain amount of information you can assimilate. And this information is stuff that it was supposed to be part of our everyday psyche that has been completely eliminated, like I said, beginning since 1833.
Right.
And so you can't download all that all at once.
No.
So we move in small steps. We start from the basics and we move forward. But we also have a website where we do online training so you learn at your own pace, called libertyfirstuniversity.com.
Yeah.
And at libertyfirstuniversity.com, we have American history, we have Constitution, we have proper role of government training. We even have some Bible classes as referred to history and politics. And we have a discipleship program set up through the application of what we're going to learn in NonCompliant, through libertyfirstuniversity.com, through our daily podcast that we do Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we take the current events that you see every day and we bring you in those events the up-to-date constitutional and principled analysis. So our podcasts motto is liberty over security, principle over party, and truth over personality.
Perfect. And
which means
do you see that this is a reason why, because things have been good in this country for a long time.
Yeah.
Right. And so people have not had to be engaged in everyday government, especially on the local levels and in your state. People seem to disengage from that and just plug into news and everything's fine. So I'm going along. So this community that you're building with Liberty First is a way to get engaged.
Right.
You don't have to be intimidated.
Right.
This is a way to start understanding, because what do you think the repercussions of us are of not engaging at this point?
Well, our founders gave us those warnings, right? Benjamin Franklin said very simply, we're giving you a republic if you can keep it.
Keep it.
Now, he said you can keep it. He didn't say we're giving you a republic if the president can keep it, or the vice president can keep it, or if your sheriff can keep it. He said if you can keep it. So the foundation of America has always been built on the premise of self-governance, right? And which is why the majority of the power is reserved local and not federal, because that's where we have the most control. And disengaging locally is fatal to our society. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, the warnings that came from our founders, that liberty always produces prosperity. That is a political, cultural, historical truth. Just like socialism always creates poverty. Right. Liberty in government always creates prosperity. Well, our founders warned that we become pacified in prosperity. It's human nature. We become lazy in luxury, and then creeps in complacent in compliance with our comfort.
Right.
And so that's why, number one, our constitutions are written on paper so that we would have visible reminders of what the limits of governments were so that we would enforce the Constitution.
Right.
So many times today, I hear people say the Constitution doesn't work. How is it that the government is supposed to limit itself? Well, the Constitution, there's nothing wrong with the Constitution, but the Constitution is a piece of paper with ink on it. It doesn't work.
Right.
It is an inanimate.
The people have to work for it to work.
Yes. Yes. So we are the working mechanism of the Constitution. And the fundamental principle that we have to understand in this constitutional republic is that it was never set up for government to limit itself.
Right.
The idea that government is the only check and balance on itself is a monarchy. It's an absolute monarchy.
Yeah.
And so we have to understand that we have an inseparable role in government, which has to mean that we do more than voting. Voting is not how we control government. It's what we do every other day of every other year, which means we have to go to the county commission meetings. We have to go to the city council meetings. We have to go to the school board meetings. We can't check out of state politics. We have to be involved in these things. I always tell people when I'm teaching, if your state house rep does not know you by name, you're not doing your job. Your state rep, he or she should know every person in their district, because every person in their district should be in their face all the time.
Right.
Well,
that's so interesting, because some of these people who are career politicians, they don't even live in their district.
Yeah.
We're
not
so
legal,
removed. Well,
but lawyers and politicians are experts at finding
loopholes. They have an address that they don't live at, right? I mean, it's just become so far removed from what these people's position is supposed to be.
And you see, the problem is that we have a tendency to then blame the politician.
Yeah.
We can't blame the politician.
We didn't hold them accountable.
It's the people's responsibility. Look, people are going to always do what they can get away with.
Yeah.
Right. So you can't say, oh, that wicked politician. No, you have to say, oh, that complacent people.
Right.
Oh, those pacified people who say nothing. And that's really the fall. Remember, Samuel Adams said, oh, we will sink underneath our own weight. And that's really what's happened. So part of the solution, because that's, what you'd ask me was, the solutions I would say the initial step to solutions, to any peaceful solution, is education.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we must educate and equip people. When you talk about having boldness, when you talk about having courage, that is a limitation of knowledge.
Right.
If you are unsettled in what you know, if you are unsure of what you believe, if you don't have a firm foundation in education to stand on, then you will be talked down because of your own confidence in what you know. So that's what we do we talk about the whole roundabout discipleship program that we do at Liberty First. We have the libertyfirstuniversity.com, which we have students, by the way, that range from 6th grade through law school.
Wow.
People with PhDs, people with doctorate degrees are all students at libertyfirstuniversity.com. Because I believe that we have been gifted with the ability to take these issues and break them down into their bottom shelf principles, so that you not only can your 6th grader get it, but you yourself are understanding that you don't know what you think you know, and what you're being told is completely not true. So we are able to make this in such a way, deliver it in such a way that it becomes compelling. It's interesting, it's exciting, and it's empowering. And that's what the adults get out of it as well.
Well, you talked about, these rights that we have before our the Constitution, right? We're born sovereign. We're given certain rights just from being born. And when it comes to our health practices, are those the rights we get to stand on in this country?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you see, that comes from the first law of nature. That it really is. Our health rights come from the first law of nature, which Samuel Adams described as the duty of self-preservation.
Mm-hmm.
Your health rights stem from the same natural right as your right to self-defense. They all come from that same source of inherent natural rights.
Right.
And that's why you have an inherent right, not something given to you by government, not a permission you need to receive, to be in control of your own body and of your own health, so that you have the self-control, the self-governance to secure your own personal existence.
Is that why then we hear these politicians say things like, well, we would not mandate this vaccine at this time. We would not mandate it. We cannot mandate it. We cannot force you to take it, but we can make it very uncomfortable for you, basically, if you do not take it. Meaning, they're funding airlines, right? If through the CARE Act, they're funding airlines, the government is funding them. And lo and behold, here's the first businesses that come out and say, oh, it's quite possible you won't be able to fly without a vaccine. It's the same muddied waters.
Yeah, I would say, just to clarify where I'm coming from, I don't believe that the government is withholding on mandates on vaccinations because they're somehow concerned with interfering with natural rights. But I do believe that they're withholding the mandates of vaccinations because they fear the backlash from the people. Government limits what it does based on fear, not based on a positive right. And that I can, if anybody questions that, it's like, oh, well, some people are in it for the good and they have good intentions. Individuals accepted the function and mechanism of government throughout the annals of history has never worked for the good of the people. They have always only limited their reach, their authority, their power based on fear of the people. And so that's something that we need to comprehend. So that if you ever see government limiting itself, it's not because they want to do the right thing.
Well, I thought maybe there was a legal loophole. There was a legal loophole that wouldn't allow them to mandate it.
The force of government is not concerned about legalities. If that were the case,
apparent.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I mean, it's an historical truth. The force of government is not concerned about legalities. If the force of government was concerned about legalities, America would have never been formed, because the British government, in its operation and constraint of our rights here as British citizens, was illegal. And was the big platform that we stood on in 1761 and 1770 when we first started taking our stand. Is, hey, look, you're operating contrary to the law.
Yeah.
You are violating our rights contrary to the law. I actually have a class at libertyfirstuniversity.com. It's one of the first classes that our students have to take. And it's called The Genealogy of the Constitution, and it's the history of the Constitution. And what I show is the legal evolution of British law to our Constitution, because there's absolutely nothing new, nothing novel, nothing invented in our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, or our Bill of Rights. They're all inherited from 5 legal documents written in England over a period of 700 years. And so when you see that chronological line of 5 legal documents to secure the rights of the people, to limit government, you really get a full comprehension, number one, of just how amazing our Constitution really is. And number two, the fact that our governments are built to preserve rights, not to control, to regulate them. And that the only power that government possesses is one that comes from us, that we consent to. Right. And so we have to really understand that we're dealing with principles of human nature here. We're not dealing with law, and government will always operate outside the law when the people disengage.
Right. I was just saying that actually to someone. We were talking about, blue states and red states and what it's like to live in them. And I said, at this point, it doesn't even matter. You need to go there and focus on how the people are acting, because it's the people that is enforcing these unlawful mandates. In my opinion, they're unlawful.
Right.
And but it is only the people complying with it that is forcing compliance.
Right.
So if everyone stopped doing it tomorrow,
Mhm.
it would be over.
Yes.
It's like, I don't,
I always tell
don't know how
people,
we get through to people that
yeah,
I literally have seen people comment that the government is there to help us and that they are only doing what they think is right.
yeah, no. Well, again, that is a symptom of ignorance.
Yeah.
When we stop teaching truth and history, and again, it all boils down to the principle of education.
Right.
We turn over the education of our society to the government. Government schools, government education programs, government education funding. And then we're shocked when we raise generations of people who love government instead of liberty,
Yeah.
because liberty and government are antithetical to each other. Personal liberty, it really is a reciprocal relationship. The more power government has, the less liberty the people have. The more liberty the people have, the less power government has.
Right.
And so government is never going to teach its people that they are the control mechanism of government, and they're never going to teach the people that they can handle liberty. So they teach that government is your protector, your provider, and your ways and means to be comfortable. And then they change the meaning of words from freedom to comfort. So now freedom means I'm comfortable, which
right.
not
it
true.
Never meant that.
No, Jefferson said
nobody died comfortably for freedom.
Yeah. Jefferson said, I prefer the tumult of liberty to the peace of slavery. Right. So
that's good.
We have to be people who have the right perspective, and it really has to begin with education.
Yeah. Let's talk about business owners, because now would be a great time for business owners to get enrolled and start learning about the Constitution and the rights that they possess, because we're just seeing small business die right now, and they're dying under fear.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
and
my first charge to a business owner is this: if you do nothing, you lose your business.
Yes.
If fear of losing your business keeps you from opening your business, keeping your business closed ensures that you will lose your business. Right. If the government was going to compensate you, they would have already done that. Yeah. If the government was going to allow you to reopen on your own terms, that would have happened. At this point, we have crossed a line. Yep. A line where the government will never relinquish control over your business, and it will only get worse.
Right.
And I hope that we realize at this point that it is going to be, for the businesses that have decided to remain open, who have reopened, can amen this. It is harder to reopen your business than it is to remain open.
Oh, yes.
And so we have to realize, and that's the purpose of the NonCompliant documentary, is to show us the power. You said, well, what if everybody just simply refused to comply? It would be done. Absolutely. That's how it works. And that's why I try to tell people that the solutions to today's problems are very simple.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean they're going to be easy.
Right.
Simple and easy do not have the same. They're not synonyms.
That's right.
It is very simple, but sometimes the simplest things can be the hardest things when your spirit and your mind is controlled by fear.
Right.
And one fear overriding another. At this point, it is almost
the barrage of fear being thrown.
Oh, yeah. And it is almost contrary to logic at this point.
Yes.
To fear what government will do to you more than you fear the destruction of your ability to live. And that's what business ownership is. It really is government control of your business at this level.
That's exactly what's happening, because they cannot go in and just close the door. So what they're doing is they're taking away their liquor licenses.
Yeah.
Right. And so they're then instilling this fear that, oh my gosh, I'll never be able to have a liquor license. But so what you said is absolutely right. You're not going to have a business anyway.
Right. So the solution is very simple. You keep doing what you're doing in spite of the threats. You just keep doing what you're doing. And I think that our communities have proven so far, even if at a small level, that we will stand together. You know, Shelley Luther kept her salon open in defiance. They gave her, you know, huge fines. Shelley didn't have to pay any of those. The community got together and paid them. We just got back from 2 days of training in Central Oregon, where in Central Oregon, they have created a community network of people who will come together, not only simply monetarily in defense of your business, but also physically. So if you want to keep your business open and the health department comes to shut you down, then you make a phone call and 50 people from the community show up at your business to help you defend your business from this unconstitutional, unlawful attack on your business.
Yep.
I really have very hopeful eyes for the future, because people will never understand the oppression they're under until they actually see it.
Right.
And we're seeing the oppression of our businesses now. We didn't feel it before. Liquor licensing, because, you know, you got to get a license. Oh, it's just a fee I have to pay. And maybe I have to have some more insurance or something. But as long as I, you know, pay it, I'll pass on the cost to the customer, whatever that means. And then I don't really feel it. Right. But now when the permission is revoked, you realize that a license is not actually you conducting business. A license is you asking for permission. To do your business. Oh my gosh. I've heard
several people say, at least they let us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at least they let us play.
That is wicked, and that is completely antithetical to private property. Yes. You have to realize, if the government is letting you do something, you don't own something.
Right.
You do not own that business. You are a tenant farmer for the government.
Wow.
You are an indentured servant for the government working on government property.
Yeah.
And so what we have, the solution, the right now solution, is just simply this. You just keep your business open. Don't shut it down. That's what NonCompliant movie is all about.
Awesome.
If they threaten to take your liquor license, you just keep selling it. You say, fine. If they threaten to put you in jail, then you develop a community that comes and bails you out. And you keep doing it. I mean, how many people have gone to jail now? My pastor went to jail for having church.
Whoa.
But when he went to jail for having church, it sent a shockwave across the country. And now you saw all of these local governments and state governments saying, no, churches are essential. You can't shut them down. Now, it didn't go everywhere, obviously, because some people still haven't gotten it. But it did send a shockwave, and especially in our state. So we don't do that anymore. But you also have to understand that has to work at the business level too. You have to be persistent, and you have to have conviction to make sure that you do this. So you don't shut down for any cost. Oh, well, we'll shut down your electricity. Okay. Well, I don't really technically need government electricity. We can bring in generators.
Yeah.
Well, we'll shut off your water. Okay, fine. I don't want government water. We'll bring in our own water. And why I'm so hopeful is because of this, Tammy. When the people begin to feel true freedom of real property ownership, you don't need government electricity, you don't need government permission, you don't need government water, then we have an opportunity that we have not had in over a century to restore true property rights in America.
Wow. It's fascinating, because over the years, you see how removed we have become from our food, from our freedom, from just like that old saying is, with the frogs in the pot being boiled. That's exactly what's happened. And now it's going to go back. We're being given the opportunity to go back and learn and recognize and show gratitude for what we have.
Absolutely.
It is a remarkable time to be alive.
Oh, and these are well, Thomas Paine said, these are the times that try men's souls. We are back at them.
Yeah, I definitely think so. What is your next event? I know tomorrow I'm talking to you on the eve of the big rally in DC. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about it a little bit. what do you see happening going down tomorrow? Do you see these people, with this new realization of what's been going on? How will that manifest on the streets, do you think? What's your
Well,
opinion?
this is not new. We've been there before. We've had big rallies in DC, and I don't want to be the wet blanket, but I do want to, insert some truth here.
Yeah.
If what happens tomorrow in Washington, D.C. ends tomorrow in Washington, D.C., then a bunch of people will have met for no purpose at all.
Right.
Because rallying one day every few years is not how we control government.
Yeah.
It's not a word. Now, rallies are good for morale. They're good for networking. They're good for creating
a movement or
groups and movements,
the feeling to move.
Yeah. Yeah. But if we do not educate, we do not organize, we do not equip, and we are not persistent and resolved to see the desired product of tomorrow's meeting, then I like I said, I don't want to be a wet blanket, but tomorrow's a waste of time.
Right.
So you want to go and socialize, you want to go be part of something, you want to go be part of a day in history. Right. That's good, but don't expect it to do anything if tomorrow is just a day.
Right. Right. It's the actions we take every day that define our results. And Absolutely. It's like with anything, you can't skip to the big event and think that is going to be the big game changer.
We are where we are because people have attended meetings now for 10 years. The Tea Party movement began in 2010 and people attended meetings and they had speakers and, but there was no real organized activity other than the meeting and the educating.
Right.
We had certain smaller groups form, and we've had some people, in small levels do really great things, but we need to organize larger, and we need to organize more powerfully, and we need to organize more persistently.
Right.
Which means we have to sort of shed the political ideology and the tribalism that is so easily besets the human nature.
Right.
Our tribalism, if we're going to be tribalistic, because we have to be, that's who we are. If we're going to be tribalistic, then we must be tribalistic to liberty and not political parties and not personalities.
Right. Do you see the two political parties continuing?
I would love to see the people educated into a position where we know we don't need political parties. But then I also am well educated on human nature and history. George Washington, the first president of the United States, the last time he ever addressed the American people as president in his farewell address, gave one of the most powerful, most stern warnings I've ever heard against political parties. And yet here we are. Yeah. So I would love to see the day where we realize that political parties are a tool to control us, not the other way around, and that we don't need them, and that we elect people based on the individual's merit, principles, and character, and not some letter behind their name. But I also understand human nature. So I would hope in the interim that we would start vetting people based on their individual character and then using the parties as a guidepost from a 30,000-foot view, right? You voluntarily place yourself into these categories. Well, that says a lot about your character to begin with. So.
Right. So I think this is a good place to kind of wrap it up, but I would like to leave our listeners with kind of a plan of action. And everything that we've talked about today, I think really centers around the fact that, it's personal responsibility. Right. So if you were to advise someone who is, out there today listening and thinking, I'm so frustrated with where we're at and I feel like I don't know what to do. What would be your plan of action for them?
I just sort of make it simple. In real estate, there are 3 principles to success in real estate, and that's location, location, location. There are 3 principles to the success in maintaining liberty to controlling politics and politicians and government, and that's education, education, education. And so if you want, people are discouraged. People are frustrated, but only so because they lack the knowledge on where to go and what to do next.
Right.
So the education part is how you defeat discouragement, how you defeat these principles of defeatism, and really get involved and get engaged. We're going in year number 11. And I can tell you that this is not, this has not been an easy sail for us for 11 years.
Yeah.
If I described the opposition that we have suffered over these 11 years, people would look at me and be like, KrisAnne, you guys are nuts. What are you, like, gluttons for punishment? Why do you even do this to your family?
Right.
Well, it's because we understand and we are educated on the system, on the solutions, and on what's necessary for success.
Right.
So education brings you the solutions that will also, an education in those solutions will ensure your success. Yeah. And they will also keep you motivated.
Yeah. And I would say that that's, definitely where it is, because with education, that there comes your confidence. Mm-hmm. And don't be afraid to reach out to community, like your real community, right? Like your real city council, your real, the people that you can see, and, stay away from this kind of chaotic.
Seriously, if the federal government tries to mandate vaccinations, but you have a city, a county, a sheriff, or a governor that says no, then you don't have to comply.
Right.
If the government says the businesses, or even, as you said, just strongly suggests because we're funding you, right? Mm-hmm. Then communities united in communities can overcome that by creating a subset of commerce where people don't have to comply, right? So in response to the airlines, well, what we need is a community of pilots and planes that will fly people who without the vaccination requirements. Right. We need a community of doctors and nurses who will treat people without vaccinations, who will hire doctors and nurses who will not be vaccinated. Right. We need a community of commerce in production and in production and distribution and manufacturing that will all function outside the mandated system. Right. And what's interesting is that is exactly what our founders did in 1761.
Right.
They created an entire underground commerce so that they would not have to comply with the unlawful government mandates.
Right.
And that's it was a solution back then. It's a solution now.
Yeah.
And it all revolves around governance. That's why the history that we teach at libertyfirstuniversity.com is so important.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I know you're a busy girl, and especially right now, and you're wanted almost everywhere because your information is so valuable. So thank you so much for spending this time with me and spreading your message. And what is your website again, one final time, so people can connect with you?
We have several of them. And so the main website where you can get our podcast and the articles that I've written and have access to the other sites is KrisAnneHall.com. So it's just my name. KrisAnnehall.com. If you want to see the trailer, it's NonCompliantMovie.com. If you want the education, it's LibertyFirstUniversity.com.
Awesome. And when does non-compliant come out?
Yeah, we're shooting for January, but we are really pushing the envelope of our movie production team. We want it in January. Okay.
So any day now.
Verum Films is the one that's doing all the editing and the producing, and they're amazing, absolutely amazing, and we just can't wait.
Yeah, the trailer looks awesome. I'm really excited for it. I can't wait to check it out.
It's going to be so powerful. I can't wait.
Yeah. Thank you so much, KrisAnne, and thank you so much for being on the Naturally Inspired podcast today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
If the Naturally Inspired movement makes sense to you, let's do this together and transform the medical model and help people take charge of their health. Learn more about how you can join the Naturally Inspired movement by going to naturallyinspiredadvocate.com or call me at 970-475-4862.